Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk Jan Upkes, and on this podcast I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech, and thank you for tuning in to episode 116. We're living in an age of AI that feels like the land of confusion. There are new tools every day that promise to change everything. But for founders, the real challenge remains the same. How do you grow your business without losing what makes it work? How do you stay hyper agile without burning out your team? And how do you put structure in place without killing everything in the process? My guest today is Marili at Hooft-Bolle. She's the CEO of Trengo. She helped scale WeTransfer and now guides Trengo through this AI-driven world. Having led companies through rapid growth, she knows the tension between building structure and keeping a team agile. In our conversation, she shares why scaling is never just about adding people, how self awareness makes or breaks leadership, and why complementary teams always deliver stronger results. Her biggest lesson is this: growth requires structure, but not too much. If you get it right, you'll navigate change with confidence, even in the age of AI. So, when you're ready to listen and learn how to navigate growth in the age of AI, please welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Marili at Hooft-Bolle. Marili, welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
Question I always ask at the start is how you got into your current position, and in your case, as CEO of Trengo.
Yeah. Well, I've been at Trengo for a little over 2 years now, and I started speaking with the founders actually quite a few months before that. They were initially looking for a COO position, but when I dug a little bit deeper, it felt as if they needed a CEO. And we actually started out on an interim contract. And I think that is a very good thing to start, right? Because it's kind of the founders handing over their baby to an external person. You can talk about that in a room in interviews in theory for a long time and like each other, but I feel that you really need to be on the floor to make sure that you're on the same page and it actually works in practice. And then, secondly, it also allows for a bit of time to form a plan and a strategy and make sure that founders, investors, and the new person, me, coming in, are all on the same page in terms of strategic direction. And so that worked out in a matter of a few months. And so then we made it final, and here I am, 2 years and a little bit in. And I think this setup really allows everyone between the founders and myself to play to our strengths.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get into playing into each other's strengths in a bit. I just was wondering. I seem to remember that there was a little hiccup in the hiring process where you sort of went your own separate ways and
Correct.
then came back.
Yeah. So I think that was probably at the start of the year or a little before the end of the year before I started.
Hmm.
And indeed, right, it's a difficult decision as founders to make, to find a replacement for yourself in certain roles. And so at that point, I also said it's got to feel good for you, right? If you're not fully on board and you're not sure, then maybe you should think about it a bit longer. And so indeed, there was a bit of a radio silence. I moved on. I actually took on a different project. And then a few weeks in, one of the founders came back to me and said, "Can we go for lunch after all? Because I really think it would be a really good fit. And I think we should start speaking again." And so I think I probably started with a quarter delay because of that, but everything happens for a reason. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
part of the decision making process was required.
Do you know why he came back?
Um, I think
Besides thinking that it was a good fit?
Well, no, mostly that, and making sure that I was still keen, of course. So it was, I mean, there were 3 founders, so I spoke to them on different occasions, yeah.
Okay. So what does Trengo do?
Trengo is a customer engagement platform. It's pretty much a place where you can handle all the communication with your customers or potential prospects. And in the old way, you could say that is a ticketing system and an inbox where all your channels come in. So your WhatsApp, your
Hmm.
Instagram, your email, etc. But actually, in today's world, customer communication, kind of the support inbox and the marketing automation are starting to blend through each other.
Hmm.
We made the platform in such a way that it's very easy to build your AI agents on them. And so that kind of has 3 components, is that what can the AI agents talk about? So that is your knowledge, the information, but also which systems can the agent actually go into. The second part is how do you want your agent to behave? So what can they talk about? What can they not talk about? Do they use emojis? What form of speech, etc. And the third one is actually the whole orchestration logic around it, as to what agent actually steps in where, and if they can't solve it, where do they escalate to? And so all the conditions around which agent operates how and when. And that we do for a not super tech savvy segment. We sell into the consumer services kind of mid market companies. So you should think about a chain of beauty clinics, or a chain of hotels, or an amusement park. We make it really easy for them to automate, let's say, between 40 to 80% of all their customer and prospect conversations, so they can focus on driving revenue and delivering value.
Okay. So what's in it for them in terms, is it also cost reduction or
Well, it
time
is.
reduction?
I think anytime where you use AI, it's like the question is it just an efficiency
Uh,
point? But I would say it actually, the knife cuts both ways in this one. So on the one hand, you can handle your incoming and, let's say, customer support function more efficiently. But
uh-huh.
that actually means that you're freeing up people who know your product and your services and your market really well to do more revenue driving or more guest satisfaction type of activity. So whilst you're reducing your costs, you are also actually freeing up the resources to drive value. So I see it as a two-way impact.
Okay. So can you give an example of how this could work, both proactively and reactively?
Yeah. Reactively is very much, let's say, you are going to a festival and you've booked a campsite, and you have questions on whether you can bring your dog in, or maybe you have questions around whether you can bring your own drinks and food to the place. Well, usually there are quite standard regulations per campsite or per, let's say, a festival maybe. That is a reactive way where the customer comes in and says, okay, I need to know these things, and then you're helped straight away. Or it can even be your on-site concierge, the AI agent, whilst you're at the festival, to say, okay, what's the latest again on the program? Do I have a VIP package? Where do I go? And then they
Uh-huh.
can answer those questions. And the proactive can be the company knowing that you've just arrived and say, hey, listen, because you've booked your VIP package, did you know you're also getting a 30% discount on the merchandising? And hey, guess what? Here's a link where you can go and buy it. Or hey, here's a coupon that you can redeem at the stand at the festival, for example. So those are two different ways of where the initiation of the communication stream starts.
Okay. So in that sense, it could also, does it then also replace apps? Or is this in app?
No, it can be in app, and it can. It doesn't necessarily have to replace the app, right? The thing is, if you put a website or an app and you have really elaborate information, usually consumers are quite lazy. So they'll see a number and they press on it and they call, right? They
Yeah.
don't actually go and browse everything. And if the search functionality isn't great, then it becomes harder. So now this AI agent can be your, let's say, little helper there. If you can't find the information intuitively in app, it can still be part of the app where that actually happens.
Okay, so then it would be sort of like you have with ChatGPT or in the old days with Google, just search or a chat screen.
Yeah, it would be a chat screen. That wouldn't be a search functionality then, because the search functionality is what you then prompt and try and find, and then you get a few links and it may not be accurate. Whereas with the agent, obviously you get the exact answer to what you're looking for.
Ah, okay. I see. So mid-market being like really big hotel chains? No,
No, I would
not the
say,
Hilton type of thing.
no, we do have a few of the bigger names, but then maybe it's very specific part. For example, we have Ritz-Carlton as our customer. We do their boating, their yachting business. But I
Uh,
would say maybe more the hotel chains that would have between 40 and a few hundred locations,
uh-huh.
or the tier two ones, I would say.
Okay. Is that on purpose or?
Well, that is a segment that we know that we can really provide value for. If you're going into the other one, you get into an enterprise market, and that has other product requirements, which is also a deliberate choice, right? You can't
Uh,
serve all the segments at the same time. And so we feel that we have a very strong proposition for that part of the market.
okay. I want to move back to you as a person. So I read, I think on LinkedIn, that you want to work for fast growing companies where innovation is the name of the game. What makes innovation attractive to you?
A good question. I think by nature, I'm not very much a person of routine. So anytime I get into routine and predictability, I start finding a little bit of boredom, I would say.
Uh-huh.
And the tech industry just has a certain pace to it, so it keeps changing, etc. And
Uh-huh.
I feel that I like challenges both from a very intellectual point of view and on a people side. So the more of an IQ and an EQ balance, that
Yeah.
those things marry up really well in a fast moving environment. And I just think it's the excitement and complication of, for example, something like AI coming into the mix now that can turn whole industries upside down, which is super exciting. And then trying to figure out how to play with those new rules. So I think I prefer difficult and changing environments also in my as a personality over something that is predictable, steady, and let's say more routine.
Uh-huh.
And now maybe your next question is why is that so?
Uh-huh.
That I find a difficult one to analyze, but I do know that suits me really well. It's
You told me that when you got the question what you wanted to be a scientist and also a bit of a social worker, which is sort of a split that well, if when I first heard it, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that was back in school. So
Yeah,
indeed, it's quite schizophrenic. So it's on a very social side and a very analytical, let's say, what they in the Dutch maybe call the beta
yeah,
studies. And so I indeed like both. And so I'm trying to find spaces where both of those things have a challenge. So if let's say if it was only an analytical job, then I would miss the people aspect. And it was only about people, I would miss the hardcore kind of analytical cracking your brain side. Yeah.
yeah. So that makes it managing a startup slash scale up pretty much the ideal working
Yeah.
environment, I
So
would
so
say.
I've found so far, yes.
Yeah. So before Trengo, you worked also for a company called WeTransfer
Yeah.
that most of the listeners will have used at least in the past. I'm still using it.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, you helped the company scale from about 50 full-time people to 200 plus.
Yeah.
Um, what is the secret behind doing that? How do your strong points play into that?
Yeah. I think first of all, I like when people say, "Oh, I've scaled from this to this," then
Hmm,
they often mention indeed the people, but I'm always like, "Oh, maybe you could have reached the same result with less people, right?" So adding more people is not necessarily a successful exercise,
hmm.
but indeed, it's about scaling an organization, scaling a business, and I think on every kind of size, it's about adding enough structure, but not too much.
Hmm.
So you can completely over engineer and try and run a 200-person company like an enterprise, but
Hmm.
there's no real need for that, right? And the nice thing about having only 200 people is that you still know the names and the faces, and there's still a lot of mandate that you can give, and you can move fast. So you don't want to kill that with process.
Hmm.
Whereas in the very small companies, let's say up to 50, you don't need a lot of process whatsoever because people will be sitting at the same table almost every day, and then you overhear stuff. But once you reach the next stage, you need to define certain, let's say, communication flows or decision structures in order to actually keep that pace and
Uh-huh.
get to results. Even with that size of a company, with however small that still is, you can still have silos occurring, and I think that is where stuff sometimes crumbles down when the left hand doesn't really know what the right hand is doing anymore.
Yeah. So how do you prevent that from happening?
Well, that is again, it's that enough process to make sure that it doesn't happen. So figure out whether it's very T-shaped in terms of the comms, right? So that the top layer and it goes down. It's creating transparency on, for example, senior leadership decisions and a place where people can go and actually see what's on the agenda for the week. It's creating weekly, monthly, quarterly, let's say all hands where people can ask their questions and hear about the state of the business. I'm always very much for a pretty transparent way of showing what the direction of the company is and why certain decisions have been made. So I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay, so really make it transparent what is happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, how do you determine what is enough process?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's obviously not a something that's cast in stone. And for the
No.
one company that's maybe fully remote,
Hmm.
you have to apply a lot more process to make sure that the information flows in the right way. Whereas if everybody co-locates and sits in the same room every day, there's more spontaneous knowledge sharing. So I think
Yeah.
it's not a clear cut, let's say, recipe. But I guess if you see that you're not moving as fast, or there's lots of things that go counterintuitive or gets lost in translation between departments, you probably need to apply a little more.
Yeah. So how did you do that for Trengo? Is Trengo is not remote? Is
No, we're
hybrid?
not remote. We have a few remote employees, but the majority is co-located in our offices in Utrecht. And people do come in several days a week, so that is very nice. For example, we have a first Friday every first Friday of the month where we look at the previous let's say month and what's coming for the next one. We do a more elaborate one on the break of the quarter.
Hmm.
We have weekly all hands sessions that anyone can claim. So let's say we are going to do a new receipt expense claim process, for example, then finance can claim that session and stand there and explain to everyone what's going on. But it can also be what have we learned from let's say the new AI suggestions coming into Google and how does it impact our marketing approach? And then marketing claims a slot. So that's pretty much a slot that anyone can claim that has something that is insightful and interesting for the entire company to hear and learn about.
Okay. Let's shift to music. I read a post from you
Yeah.
about a song from Genesis, "The
Yeah.
Land of Confusion." Um, are we in a land of confusion with AI still? And
I
more
would probably
importantly, how do we get out?
I would probably argue yes, so, but I'm not sure that is different from any, let's say, shift in technology. But I do feel that we've entered an era of unprecedented compute, mostly that
Hmm.
we haven't seen before, which can fully shake industries and put whole systems upside down again. And I think whoever was the dominant player in the last 10 to 20 years in the SaaS world as we knew it is not necessarily well and best equipped for the next decade. And so, yes, we are trying to figure it out together. And actually, that quote that you saw was from a speech that I did that said, you can't always, let's say, find the answer in data, right? Some people just derive a lot of confidence out of hundreds of data models, but they say that the longer you torture data, it will confess to anything. You can always make the model work based on which assumptions and go in a direction, right? But there's also this other thing that's based on experience, knowledge, customer discussions, etc., maybe even intuition that plays into decision making. And so, in a land of confusion, spreadsheet won't always help you get out of it. And sometimes it's also, and particularly now with AI, right? It's
Yeah, I
also
don't
necessary.
even have to torture ChatGPT,
No,
I have to say. It
that's
will come.
true. I think it's also about placing bets, right? So now the VCs are putting money in lots of AI initiatives, and they also don't know whether those are the ones that are going to be, holding the winning formula in the end. And so, yes, I would say we are all still trying to figure out this new space, but we're all in the same boat and trying to figure it out together.
Yeah. So what's talking about bets? What's the bet that Trengo has taken that the other companies in the space have missed?
Well, I'm not sure they would have missed it. First of all, it's kind of reimagining your entire product now on the basis of what AI can do, right? So
Hmm.
don't build the next version of what you knew or what you had, but it's really like reimagine the value for your customer, but now in the Gen AI space. I think, secondly, internally on our processes, we have completely revamped our company values to also fit this new space. And one of them is we're dynamic, and the other one is we're future proof. And that also means that we embrace working in a new way quicker than, let's say, that some of the other companies will do in the market, which means whatever we knew about how we did things, we can do them better. For example, we have all our customer calls, whether they're with a prospect, existing customer, whatever comes into support desk, etc., all going into one big system, and then we can query that for synthesis of, out of this particular segment and of all the deals we've lost, what was the main driver for them not choosing Trengo over a competitor, for example. And that intelligence is so insightful and valuable. And yes, we had tools that had some of that before, but with AI, it becomes you can tie all of that together. Or, for example, we've built an assistant that helps us if we go to a new prospect. There's also always certain things that you want to try and find out about that company before you speak to them, right? You want to understand their business model, you understand where their pain sits, etc. And now this assistant, you just give the name of the company, and they'll do the research as we normally do across the several sources for you, and then you just get a whole brief as to, okay, who am I going to speak to? What is this about? Where is the angle that? Why would they speak to Trengo, etc. So I think. Becoming hyper agile
Hmm.
is the one thing that we want to do in this new space. That is going to hopefully set us apart from some of the other companies. It's reimagine, not build from what you have, and going hyper agile because the cycles are only getting shorter and shorter in terms of learning.
Yeah, how do you do that in terms of balance with workload? Because you can keep sort of continue to work on things 24 hours if you
Yeah.
want, but there's also something like sleep that people need and work life.
Yeah, I'm a very big advocate for a good work-life balance. I think switching off actually makes you more creative and more energetic as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'm not so sure that hyper agile means doing more and spending your time less efficiently, right? It's actually about iterating faster. So it's more about the pace than the volume necessarily. And I think actually with AI now as all our kind of external super brains,
Uh-huh.
we can actually be even more efficient maybe with our time and still have 20 more learnings.
Okay. So one of the bigger fears of people with AI is about privacy and about biases. How do you prevent that from happening at Trengo? Because you use external models, data
Yeah,
models, right?
yeah. We can, we're LLM agnostic, so our product can point to various LLMs. And I would say there will always be, because these LLMs consume heaps and heaps and heaps of amounts of data, and
Yeah.
whatever bias is in that data will also shine through in the model, right? So I don't think you can be completely, let's say, get rid of all bias.
Hmm.
What you can still do is in your prompts, as to before anything then goes out, you can still put boundaries as to what you want things to be spoken about, or whether you want to use specific pronouns, or if you generate images, you can also prompt as to what type of people are shown there, etc. So you can take exactly what comes out of the LLM, or you can shape and give boundaries to what how you then, let's say, pass that information on.
Okay, and does Trengo do that, or does the customer do that by defining tone of voice,
Yeah.
use of emojis, whatever?
Yeah, so the customer can do that for their customer, right? So somebody who's a financial services company probably wants to speak very differently to their customers than someone who's an amusement park, for example. We do have a prompt layer, but that's also more to make sure that things get escalated if something is off, right? If some answer isn't given, or something gets stuck, or there's a 20-second delay or whatever, that immediately an escalation can come in. So we do more of the security, safety, performance prompts, but the actual tone of voice and how they want to speak, or whether they want to use a certain way of portraying, let's say, their customer base, that's obviously up to the client to decide on.
Okay, so how do you then do the protection bit?
We put logic in, and also we learn by our own mistakes as well. Because at some point we did an investigation. It was actually in a very different topic. It was just about WhatsApp traffic, and then we learned there was one of our bots deployed at one of our clients that had received an incoming call from actually not a person but a bot. And so our one responded very nicely about, hello, I'm so and so. What's your name? Can I help you? And the other one then exchanged another pleasantry and said, hi, how can I help you? I didn't understand your question. Could you please repeat it? And that went back and forth and back and forth. And they were in this loop of, let's say, perfectly polite pleasantries.
Yeah.
And then our one was instructed, if 25 seconds into it you don't there's something funky going on, then they should ask the other one to please escalate. And then that didn't happen on the other side, so they just kept going, and that went on for weeks actually. So that was a big learning, so that we had to put another boundary around what we thought was enough, a 25-second escalation rule. But we needed to be more specific as to what we and how and when we wanted that to trigger.
Yeah, because when you just told me this, I was thinking like the next step in AI will be bots talking to bots.
Yes,
And then it sort of becomes important to have, at least in your own bot, good boundaries around it. But
totally.
is it something that also has to be done on a more systemic level?
Yeah, I think generally it's good to have checks and balances, right? And
Mm.
I think it also matters what the subject is. For example, particularly as now we're in the age of agentic AI, right? They don't just supply information, but they actually go do things in systems. So we now have customers who, let's say, cancel an order, and then the bot actually cancels. So the AI agent cancels the order. Now the question is, does that then automatically trigger a refund or not? Because that's when money starts flowing. And
Yeah.
so, do you need an extra balance? Or if that's the automated next one, when would you, let's say, police? So, there needs to be a monitoring system. If suddenly the same amount goes to, 25 bank accounts in the same 3 minutes, should a red flag go up and say something is funky here? So, where it used to be about managing people and how many tickets they resolved in the support desk, it now becomes more of an overview of all these different agents and bots running, and a monitoring, let's say, dashboard as to, hey, this is a normal business, this is out of the ordinary, and what gets flagged where, and so where do I have to dig in to see if everything is running smoothly. Yeah, and as soon as it's money, bank accounts, etc., obviously those controls need to be a lot stricter than whether it's, can I bring my dog to the festival?
For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about the technical part and AI and about Trengo. I wanted to move a bit back to you as a person.
Yeah.
What Because we've had a number of conversations so far, and what struck me really is that um, you have a passion for innovation, and on the other hand, also people. But what I also found is that you really want to complement a team. W- why is that important to you?
Well, I think I think nobody has all skill sets, right? And in order to achieve something, you need a lot of different skill sets to make that work.
Yeah,
And particularly in the situation that I'm in, so as an external person coming into a founding team,
yeah.
that's even more important. Like if they were to hire a CEO with the exact same qualities that they have, then what are they solving for? And why did they even take an external person if they already have it?
Hmm.
So I think that complementarity is super important, and that's also one of the reasons why we said let's do a trial period and work together to make sure that that is actually not just there in theory, but also there in practice. Um, and the founders now are very much focused on products and on engineering.
Hmm.
And so they're very much also people of detail. I'm much more of the strategic, longer, broad strokes, and the managing the people, and so that works really well together.
Okay. And why is it important to you to fit in, to belong?
Um, in the end, we're trying to build something that's super exciting for our customers. And
Hmm.
let's say for me, that's a true North Star is that you build something super valuable that your customers see the benefit of and are happy to work with and recommend, etc. And I think the way to get there is to find that complementarity and make sure that everybody can play at their strengths because then you move the fastest and you can probably develop that in the best way. And there's no point in working somewhere where you're not a fit, right? I think generally in careers, when you sometimes lose your job involuntarily, it
Uh-huh.
can actually be a bit of a blessing because it's never about somebody not being good, but it's more of a mismatch in what is required at that point in time for the company and what does the person personally thrive at. And if there's a mismatch between the two, then there's probably two unhappy sides. So,
Can a mismatch develop over time?
yes, definitely. So, what makes total sense in a certain phase of the company may require, let's say, somebody is a head of marketing, and marketing between 0 and 3, and let's say if 10 is enterprise, would require a different skill set, maybe than for someone who needs to bring it from 3 to 7, and let alone from 7 to 10 again. So, I do think that mismatch can arise over time.
Okay. Does it also apply to CEOs that there's
Yes.
a sort of, let's say, quote unquote, holding period? I'm thinking best before.
Yeah. I agree. I think, first of all, you see that there's only very few people who, like Zuckerberg, can bring it from a startup into a $1 billion company and still hold the reins. I think that's not very common. So you do see and that's just growth phase. But I think also at some point, once you've been around the block for a number of years and you've done it 7 times, sometimes a fresh perspective or a new look or is also beneficial for the company.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you prevent? Because you told us at the beginning that you don't want to get bored, and
yeah,
that you at some point you do get bored. How do you spot that when that happens?
it's mostly about energy. I think if let's say the energy that you get from your work and the energy that you put in
Hmm.
need to be in a certain balance, right? And there's always parts of your job that are not the most
Hmm.
exciting bits,
Yeah.
but hopefully it's 80-20 of the stuff that does excite you. And if that balance shifts between 20-80 of the 20 does excite and the 80% doesn't excite anymore, probably your outside of work energy will be a lot different as well. And so that's the point where you need to either pay attention and maybe redistribute the tasks or think about, let's say, next horizons. from a
Okay.
personal point of view, right? That's not necessarily the company side.
No, but and what do you do then as a person?
Well, first of all, to see
Because
is
it's sort
there,
of scary to a signal that,
yeah,
and then b also take the leap to go
do
for
something
some,
about it.
yeah, to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, first one is acknowledging it and then trying to identify in which of the elements that sits. Then the second one is, I think, to discuss it and decide what you could change in terms of holding which part of, let's say, the ownership of the, let's say, the company tasks or focus or etc. And it's also a discussion that I have with, people on my team reporting to me, because we're a small company, so it's not like there's 20 growth trajectories for everyone post the step that they're at, right? And there
Yeah.
is a point where maybe you've outgrown your current seat, the seat above you is filled, and you don't have a lateral move, then yeah, the most logical move is somewhere else, and then I'll happily, obviously, help the person transition, um, both in there and in the company's interest. So I think it's important to have those discussions quite openly and honestly. Yeah.
How
And where for
often?
me that is on
Yeah.
routine, boredom, etc., for somebody else it can be something completely different, right? I've mastered this skill or this, let's say, job description. I now need to own more, but there might not always be more in a small
No,
company.
no, in a small company, the number of things to do, number of areas to be in are still limited.
Yeah.
It's not like your ING where the world is pretty much everywhere.
Exactly.
So I was wondering, you've done a lot of leadership at WeTransfer, now at Trengo, but also at other companies. What's one lesson that you've learned that you still apply today?
Well, I touched upon one more generic one, I think, previously. It's like, for me, value should be the goal. And value, I mean, actually, value for your customer. So, not necessarily monetary value. And you sometimes see people chasing, like, I'm starting a company because I want to be rich. I
Yeah,
think you would have started the company because you want something in the market, or you see an opportunity that isn't there yet, and you desperately want to bring that into, let's say,
yeah. You
into,
want to give a solution, and
yes,
hopefully, as a result of it, earn money.
exactly, instead of making that the goal. So I would say that is one lesson. And maybe on a more personal level, I tend to go in solutionizing mode pretty quickly if somebody comes to me with a problem, whatever. But sometimes that person just wants to vent
Yeah.
and just get the emotional side of that out of the way. And so I think on a personal level, I learned to leave some space for that instead of going immediately into, okay, what can we do about it?
Yeah, that's it's common. It's a reflex I recognize from myself, but I always thought it was more because men tend to do this, tend
Yeah.
to sort of run around the emotion and then go straight to the solution mode.
Well, maybe it is more predominant in men, that I don't know. I do know that I display that same
Okay,
behavior.
so how do you work around that? Just
Um,
curious.
I mean, it's again acknowledging it and being aware of it, and that comes through feedback or reflecting back on a situation where you think, an hour later, a day after, oh, we could have done that in a different way, and
Okay,
maybe it would have been much more effective. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think about these situations a lot? Are you
Yeah,
more of the
many
pensive
times.
side?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's, I mean, this is, um, you want, let's say, the human interactions on the team to be as smooth as they can be, right? So if some of this is in the way, it'll take energy for things that you would rather have that energy spent on something else.
Uh huh.
So it's trying to understand, and every team has their own dynamics, and every bilateral sort of relationship in that team has their own dynamics, because people are all different personalities. So I do like, actually, going through some of those personality tests with the team, and not to pinpoint or put people in a sort of quadrant somewhere, but for all of us to understand each other well as to where do I normally come from, where does somebody else come from, where are the sensitive parts for the one or the other, so you can read better how that person maybe responds to you and how you can improve. Let's say if you want something done from someone, the one listens very much to rational explanation. The other one doesn't care at all about that, right? So, and if you still want it done, then it does make sense that you know a little bit each other's manual or instructions. So,
Yeah.
yes, I do spend time on that.
Yeah. Do you also coach people in your leadership team on that?
Yeah, well, I
Like
mean,
if
that
you
is,
spot things like, hey, I see this discussion going off the rails for, let's
yes.
say,
So,
non-functional reasons.
yeah, that is definitely something that obviously, as any manager, you would also take a part in. But I also get external people sometimes to help us, let's say, on more observing and then solutionizing for the team dynamics, what where we might get stuck, and then they kind of also plant little seeds of, okay, how do you recognize a certain pattern of behavior? How can you change that, or when do you put a stop to that, etc. So that's super helpful as well.
Yeah. Does that also have the difference in manuals, let's say, that is especially relevant if you have a diverse team, if you want to build an inclusive business, let me put it that way. Um, you focus particularly on also building those inclusive teams, or is that something that sort of comes easy?
No, I do. I find it very important,
Huh?
and I think the utopia is that it happens naturally because if you just go for, let's say, the skill sets and everything that you need, you would by definition get a diverse team.
Is that
I
so?
also think that the reality isn't always exactly like that. So in every step of hiring, whether you put the job description out for once you do the screening interview, the actual interviews, bias will creep into it, right? So maybe you also need to be acting a little bit more conscious. I do know that at Trengo we have a really good gender balance across the board. So we were well above the industry trends as the overall company, but also particularly on the product engineering, data engineering type of roles. But I'd love to be even closer to 50-50. And we have on our 100-person team probably 30 nationalities. And so I think we're pretty good on diversity. And I see that it brings richer outcomes. Sometimes it takes a little bit more debate because sometimes people don't understand each other that well. Even the difference between the native English speakers and the non-native English speakers, right?
Yeah.
It's you can't express to the exact same sentiment as the native speaker, and then yeah, stuff might be perceived less nuanced than you meant it to be, but you just don't have the vocabulary to make it maybe more nuanced, for example.
Yeah. How important is it when you're developing AI to have an inclusive team or to have a
I'm not so
diverse team?
sure if whether with or without AI has a difference. I would say I think any team can benefit from it because we are selling to the entire universe, and that also consists of a lot of different flavors and people from different walks of life. So the more you have, let's say, on your team, the more you can also reflect to your audiences. I'm not so sure that AI is a distinguishing factor there.
No, well, I was thinking along the lines of helping customers prevent bias or spotting biases earlier.
Yeah, that could be, but that is not exactly the tool set that we're in, right? So I think if they felt very strongly about it, they could actually review all their data and figure out where they may or may not be biased in it. But that's not necessarily tooling that we provide. So maybe on a more informal way, we would come across that team, but
Huh?
it's not, let's say, the how our product is used or yeah.
Okay. So you posted on LinkedIn a while ago that you hoped to live to tell that International Women's Day wasn't necessary anymore. That it wasn't necessary to celebrate it anymore.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, in my view, if you have a special Women's Day or the top 50 women leaders, or
Mm,
it means that that is the exception. So if it's only that one day that's the exception, it means that all the other day, the implication is almost that they are not women days.
uh-huh.
And if we were to be all equal, and then I would say there's no need to call it out, because the let's say the difference doesn't matter anymore. So as long as you feel that you need to call it out, it means there isn't a full balance yet. That's
How
how
do
I look at it.
Yeah. So how do we get there?
How do we get there? So I think we've come a long way. I do think very much improving. I also think having more role models is a good one. I also feel that we, let's say, in terms of what we're seeing happening in medicine, in history, in inventions, right? So some of the truth finding, exactly, some of the inventions done by women were claimed by men over the past. It's how we position them in movies, or let's say fiction, etc. All of these little things, like starting with the books you start to read when you first learn to read, right? So how much do we put a gender kind of bias in there already? And I think we are starting to become more, let's say, susceptible to that, and more understanding of how all of these things kind of interact. I think from a personal point of view, what I can do is participate in sessions like you organize, but also in mentorship for women entrepreneurs or other women managers. But looking at, I have two daughters who are in college now. Um, and I do think from when I was there, we've already made big strides from there. And so I hope, I don't know if it's that early, but by the time they have, let's say, children who are in universities,
Hmm.
maybe the Women's Day is not as required anymore. That'll be maybe another, whatever, 25, 30 years, but let's see.
Yeah. What role can men play in that?
Men can definitely play a role as well, right? It is also, again, knowing your, there's this thing called identification bias. So
Hmm.
if you speak to someone who's a little bit like you, and you recognize and you understand each other really well,
Hmm.
that you feel that that person is equipped to work with you, or maybe a very good person to add to your team. But if you understand that complementarity is maybe the better, let's say, element to look for,
Yeah.
it means that that identification bias is actually a negative thing in terms of finding that
Uh-huh.
complementarity. So I think it's all about consciousness, and really knowing yourself, and understanding what that looks like, and also realizing that we will all have some bias, right? You are brought up in a different way than I was brought up. You have had different expectations, maybe because you were a man from your parents, and maybe mine were different because I was the daughter. So acknowledging that, and then defining your own path through that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point, I spoke to a guest recently who called empathy a double-edged sword in the sense that empathy often is really seen as good from a manager, that he or she has empathy, but that it also colors, let's say, the, the people you work with, the people you promote, the people you like, the people you
Hmm.
hire in that sense. So that, yeah, that sounds really familiar, and I'm starting to see that as well. I
Yeah.
have to
And
say.
and I would say in general in business, and particularly with performance review, etc., it's very hard to make the distinction between liking someone
Hmm?
and thinking someone is very good for the role, right? You can like someone very much and still fire them,
Yeah,
or you can dislike them but really see how they're amazing in the role that they're in, and trying to separate those two is difficult, but I think that's what's required to do an objective performance review.
yeah. Marili, thank you very much
Thank you
for
very much.
the interview. If people want to learn more about you and about Trengo,
Yeah.
where would you like to send them?
Obviously to trengo.com and to my LinkedIn. I think you will maybe also
Yeah,
add some to
we'll
the
include a link
images.
in the show notes.
Yeah. And then I have an AI voice assistant where you can call me and then you'll speak to my alter ego and you can ask anything about Trengo and what we might deliver for your company.
Okay, well, we'll include that's a phone number, I think.
Yeah, it
Or
is a phone number.
okay,
I'll send it over to you.
yeah. You now I remember that you don't give out your number except for this one.
Exactly.
Okay. Marili at Hooft-Bolle, thank you very much for an amazing interview.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed this. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, keep being awesome. Well, that's it for episode 116 of Women Disrupting Tech with Marili at Hooft-Bolle on how to navigate growth in the age of AI. Marili and I hope that you found our conversation as empowering and engaging as we intended it to be. And if you have any questions for Marili, please leave them in the comments on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I'll make sure you receive an answer. When you want to connect with Marili or learn more about Trengo, please check out the links in the show notes. That's where you will also find her phone number and a link to the music video of Land of Confusion by Genesis. As usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog, and the link is also in the description. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review on Spotify or Apple. Leaving a rating or a review helps new listeners find the podcast and supports my guests by giving them a bigger platform. If you're a regular listener, please make sure to follow Women Disrupting Tech on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or YouTube. Following Women Disrupting Tech is a simple, zero-cost way to support Marili and my other guests in making inclusion in tech the new normal by the end of 2032. For more about Women Disrupting Tech, please follow the podcast on social media. You can find us everywhere as at Women Disrupting Tech. Women Disrupting Tech is also on Substack. On Substack, you will find in-depth stories and behind-the-scenes insights, plus trends that I've spotted across 100 plus conversations so far. So don't forget to subscribe to Women Disrupting Tech on Substack. Finally, if you'd like to connect with me directly, please reach out via email dirkjan at womendisruptingtech.blog or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Dirk-Jan Hupkes, and you'll find me. With that, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope to see you in the next episode. And until then, as always, keep being awesome.